What if I told you that at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, there's a letter containing the last words of love from someone who knew they were about to die? Well, I am that letter. And after 112 years of silence, it's time I told my story. My name. Well, I don't have one. I'm just paper and ink, sealed with hope and delivered by tragedy. I was born in a first-class cabin aboard the RMS Titanic on April 14th, 1912. The hands that created me were trembling, not from the cold Atlantic air, but from love so deep it could move mountains or sink ships. I remember everything about that night. The luxury, the laughter, the music drifting from the grand staircase. The ship was called Unsinkable, and everyone believed it. Everyone except me. You see, when you're made of paper, you understand fragility in ways others cannot. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret O'Sullivan, 23 years old, traveling back to New York after visiting her family in Ireland. She had auburn hair that caught the light like fire, and eyes that held oceans long before she met one that would claim her life. She was writing me for Thomas Mitchell, her fiancé, waiting in New York. They had planned to marry in June. She had already picked her dress, white silk with pearl buttons, she told me as she wrote. Her hands shook as she dipped the pen in ink, not from fear but from excitement. She was finally going home to the man she loved. "My dearest Thomas," she began, and I felt the weight of every word as it flowed from her heart through the pen onto my surface. "By the time you read this, I will be in your arms and we can begin our life together. The journey has been long, but every mile brings me closer to you. I absorbed every letter, every comma, every period. I became more than paper. I became a vessel for pure love." She wrote about their future, the house they would buy in Queens, the children they would have. She wanted 4. I remember that clearly. She wrote about her fears too. What if he had changed his mind? What if 3 months apart had made him realize he loved someone else? "I pray you still love me as I love you, with every fiber of my being. You are my sun, my moon, my entire universe. Without you, I am just a girl lost at sea." How prophetic those words would become. April 14th, 11:40 p.m. I was resting in Margaret's purse, sealed and ready to be mailed the moment we docked in New York. She had kissed my envelope 3 times, once for luck, once for love, and once for safe passage. Then it happened. The ship shuddered, not violently at first, just a subtle tremor that most passengers dismissed. But I felt it in every fiber of my being. Margaret felt it too. She sat up in her bed, clutching her nightgown. "What was that?" She whispered to her roommate Sarah. The engine stopped. That's when the real fear began. The Titanic's engines had been running constantly for 4 days. Their sudden silence was deafening. Margaret grabbed me from her purse and held me against her chest. I could feel her heart racing. Through the porthole, we could see something massive and white sliding past. The iceberg that had just sealed our fate. The water began coming in. Not all at once, but steadily, relentlessly. I watched Margaret's face change as the reality sank in, both literally and figuratively. The unsinkable ship was sinking, and I was going down with it. "Women and children first!" The cry echoed through the corridors. Margaret knew she had a chance to survive. She was young, she was in first class, she had access to the lifeboats. But as she prepared to leave, she looked at me one last time. She opened my envelope. My heart broke. If paper can have a heart, she was going to rewrite me, add something more. "Thomas," she wrote hastily in the margins, her handwriting now shaking with fear. "If you're reading this, then I didn't make it home. The ship is sinking. I want you to know that my last thoughts are of you. I love you more than the ocean is deep, more than the sky is wide. Please don't mourn me forever. Find love again. Be happy. Live for both of us." She sealed me again, but this time she didn't put me in her purse. Instead, she placed me in a waterproof pouch she had been using for her jewelry. She kissed the pouch and whispered, "Maybe someday." Margaret made it to the boat deck. She could have gotten on lifeboat number 6. I watched from her coat pocket as she stood at the edge of safety. But then she saw little Timothy Sullivan, no relation, just a boy who shared her Irish surname. He was crying for his mother, who had been separated from him in the chaos. Margaret made a choice that would haunt me forever. She lifted Timothy up and handed him to the officer loading the lifeboat. "Take him," she said. "He's more important than I am." She gave up her seat. She gave up her life. For a child she didn't even know. As the lifeboat lowered, Margaret took me out of her pocket one last time. She threw me toward the lifeboat, hoping I might make it to safety, might somehow reach Thomas. But I fell short, landing on the deck of the sinking ship. I watched Margaret walk back into the ship. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She held her head high and walked with dignity toward whatever came next. I never saw her again. The ship tilted more and more. I slid across the deck, bumping into deck chairs and pieces of debris. Other passengers ran past me, some screaming, some praying, some accepting their fate with quiet courage. At 2:17 a.m., the lights went out. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic broke in two. I felt myself falling into the icy Atlantic. The water was so cold it felt like fire against my paper surface. I should have dissolved immediately, but Margaret's waterproof pouch saved me, at least temporarily. I sank through 500 feet of water. It took me nearly an hour to reach the ocean floor. During that descent, I had time to think, time to understand the weight of what I carried. I wasn't just a love letter anymore. I was Margaret's final testament. I was proof that love exists even in the face of death. When I finally came to rest on the ocean floor, I was surrounded by debris, deck chairs, pieces of the grand staircase, suitcases, and bodies. So many bodies. Margaret was among them, her red hair floating like seaweed in the eternal darkness. Years passed. Decades. The ocean floor became my world. Fish swam through my resting place. The metal from the ship began to rust and decay. The wood rotted away. But I remained, protected by that waterproof pouch, carrying my precious cargo of love and loss. I watched as deep-sea creatures made homes in the Titanic's remains. I saw expeditions come and go. Researchers and treasure hunters looking for artifacts and answers. Some found dishes and jewelry. Others found personal items that told stories of lives cut short. But none found me. I began to understand something during those long, dark years. I wasn't just preserving Margaret's words for Thomas. I was preserving them for history, for anyone who needed to believe that love conquers all, even death. In 1985, Robert Ballard found the Titanic. The world was fascinated all over again. Books were written, movies were made. The story was told and retold. But my story, Margaret's story, remained untold. I listened to the researchers as they explored the wreckage. They spoke of the ship's engineering, its design flaws, the social hierarchies that determined who lived and who died. But they missed the most important story of all, the love story that played out in those final moments. Thomas waited for Margaret. I know this because in 1997, when James Cameron's movie brought the Titanic back to the world's attention, I learned that researchers had found records of him. He waited at the dock in New York for 3 days, refusing to believe she was gone. When the survivors list was finally posted and her name wasn't on it, he collapsed. He never married. He kept her photograph on his mantle until the day he died in 1963. He would have been 74. Every year on April 14th, he would go to the harbor and throw white roses into the water. One for each year she had been gone. He died not knowing about me. Not knowing that Margaret's final words were words of love for him. Not knowing that she had released him from their promise, had told him to find happiness without her. But maybe that was for the best. Maybe the love he carried for her, unmarked by the tragedy of her final moments, was purer somehow. Maybe not knowing about my existence allowed him to remember her as she was, vibrant, alive, full of hope. In 2019, something remarkable happened. A new expedition to the Titanic, using advanced underwater vehicles, discovered me. I had been buried under sediment for over a century, but erosion had exposed my resting place. The waterproof pouch had done its job. I was damaged but readable. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, no relation to Thomas, but the coincidence of the name made my paper fibers tingle, was the marine archaeologist who found me. She held me with a reverence I deserved, understanding immediately what I represented. "This isn't just a letter," she said to her team. "This is a time capsule. This is love preserved in its purest form." They brought me to the surface for the first time in 107 years. The sunlight nearly blinded me. The air felt strange after so long underwater, but I was finally free to tell my story. Dr. Mitchell worked with genealogists to trace both Margaret's and Thomas's families. Margaret had a sister who had stayed in Ireland. Her descendants still lived in County Cork. Thomas had a nephew who had moved to California. His great-grandson was a teacher in San Francisco. When they brought us together, Margaret's family and Thomas's family, something magical happened. They shared stories that had been passed down through generations. Thomas's great-grandson, Michael, had kept all of Thomas's belongings, including letters from Margaret that she had sent before her trip. He always said she was coming home with something important to tell him. Michael revealed. He never knew what it was. Now we know. She was coming home to tell him that her love for him was stronger than fear, deeper than the ocean, more enduring than life itself. Today, I rest in a climate-controlled case at the Maritime Museum in New York. Visitors come from around the world to see me. Schoolchildren press their faces against the glass, trying to read Margaret's faded words. Couples hold hands as they listen to my story, perhaps understanding their own love a little better. But I'm not just a museum piece, I'm a reminder. A reminder that love is the most powerful force in the universe. That in our darkest moments, love is what sustains us. That even when everything else fails, when ships sink, when lives are lost, when dreams are shattered, love endures. Margaret gave up her seat on that lifeboat for a child she didn't know. That's love. Thomas waited 51 years for a woman who would never come home. That's love. Dr. Mitchell spent months restoring me, understanding that some stories are too important to lose. That's love too. Every day, people ask me if I'm sad that I never reached my destination. But here's what I've learned in my 112 years of existence. I did reach my destination. Just not the one Margaret intended. My destination wasn't Thomas's hands. It wasn't even Margaret's hometown of New York. My destination was the human heart. Every person who reads my story, who learns about Margaret's sacrifice, who understands that love transcends death, they become my destination. I think about all the letters that are written but never sent, all the words of love that are spoken too late, all the chances we don't take because we think we have more time. Margaret thought she had time. She thought she would see Thomas again, that she would have years to tell him how much she loved him. She thought she would grow old with him, watch their children play in that house in Queens, celebrate 50 wedding anniversaries. But time is the one thing none of us can control. The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. Margaret was supposed to make it home. Thomas was supposed to get his letter. Life is supposed to be a lot of things that it isn't. What we can control is how we love, how we show up for each other, how we choose hope over fear, sacrifice over selfishness, love over everything else. Margaret could have pushed that little boy aside and saved herself. She could have focused on her own survival. Instead, she chose love. She chose to give her life so that someone else could live theirs. That choice echoes through time. Timothy Sullivan, the boy she saved, grew up to become a doctor. He saved countless lives during World War II. He married and had children and grandchildren. His family line continues because Margaret chose love in her final moment. If Margaret could speak to you today, I know what she would say. I carry her words, after all. I carry her heart. She would say, "Don't wait. Don't assume you have tomorrow to say the words that matter. Don't take love for granted. Don't let pride or fear keep you from telling someone how much they mean to you." She would say, "Choose love, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Love isn't just the easy moments, the first kiss, the wedding day, the happy times. Love is choosing each other when the ship is sinking. Love is giving up your lifeboat seat. Love is waiting 51 years for someone who will never come home. She would say, "Be brave." Not the kind of brave that charges into battle or climbs mountains. The kind of brave that says, "I love you first." The kind of brave that forgives. The kind of brave that hopes when hope seems foolish. In our modern world, we send messages instantly. Texts, emails, social media posts. We can communicate with anyone, anywhere, at any time. But do we really communicate? Do we tell the people we love how much they mean to us? I think about all the unsent texts, all the drafted emails that are never sent, all the phone calls we mean to make but don't. Modern technology has made communication easier, but somehow we communicate less of what really matters. Margaret didn't have smartphones or social media. She had paper and ink and hope. She poured her heart onto my surface with the understanding that words matter, that love, when expressed, becomes eternal. How many of us would take the time to write a letter like Margaret wrote? How many of us would choose our words so carefully, knowing they might be our last? My story doesn't end with my discovery. It doesn't end with my place in the museum. It continues every time someone reads Margaret's words and is inspired to write their own letter of love. It continues every time someone chooses sacrifice over selfishness. It continues every time love wins. Recently, a young couple visited the museum. They had been fighting for weeks on the verge of breaking up. They read my story together, and I watched as understanding passed between them. They left holding hands, whispering promises to each other. That's my real purpose. Not to be a relic of tragedy, but to be a catalyst for love. To remind people that love is worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. An elderly man comes to see me every month. His wife died last year, and he tells me he understands Thomas now. He understands what it means to love someone so much that their absence leaves a hole in the universe. But he also tells me that my story gives him hope. That somewhere, somehow, love continues. I am a love letter that never reached its intended destination. But in failing to reach Thomas, I reached something far greater. I reached eternity. Margaret's love for Thomas is no longer just between two people. It belongs to all of us now. It belongs to anyone who has ever loved someone so much it hurt. It belongs to anyone who has ever made a sacrifice for love. It belongs to anyone who believes that love is stronger than death. In the end, that's what I am. I'm not just paper and ink. I'm not just words on a page. I'm proof that love is the most powerful force in the universe. I'm proof that some stories are too important to sink with the ship. I'm proof that love never dies. So the next time you have something important to say to someone you love, don't wait. Don't assume you'll have another chance. Say it now. Write it down. Make it real. Because you never know when the ship might start sinking. And when it does, let love be the only thing that matters. In memory of the 514 people who died aboard the RMS Titanic, and in celebration of the love that survives them all.